Good evening. How do you pick up stitches for the sleeves without getting holes under the arms? How do you weave in the ends? Or how do you avoid rowing out? Well, my friend, stick around and all of that will be revealed in this video. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Geek and today we're gonna activate full-on knitting geek mode. In this video, we're diving into some very specific knitting tips that will make you a smarter, less overwhelmed, and overall better knitter. So I have actually here on my channel 2 previous videos with some knitting tips, but they are fairly old, but you guys seem to really like them, so I thought it was time for an updated version. Now, in the preparation for this video, I actually reached out on Instagram and asked you what you are struggling with when it comes to knitting. And there were definitely some themes that we could suss out from those. And we're gonna try to really answer those today. Now, some were larger knitting, I was gonna say monstrosities, but maybe that's a little bit over dramatic, but for example, short rows. And I decided to not include that in this video, but make its own designated video because it just feels there is so much to say about short rows. So that is coming up. But first, when I started to plan this video, I was also thinking about what it means to actually be a good knitter. And this took me back to my dancing days, and I remembered something a ballet teacher once told me. And basically the message was that being the perfect ballet dancer is not necessarily about always nailing the perfect technique, having the perfect pirouette, but actually good technique is that you can course correct. So if you're not really aligned, you know what to do to stay on course, don't like fall on your butt, essentially, and still complete that pirouette nicely. And well, if you've ever done ballet, you know how important it is to finish the movement and just look like very poised and put together all the way through. And I kind of think the same applies to knitting in a way. So of course there's gonna be issues that you're gonna run into and things that you maybe didn't foresee, a little stitch that snuck in there, suddenly you have too many stitches, something happened, something looks wonky. So I hope to be able to give you some tools that you can use to then correct those things, and that you don't have to unravel your whole thing in a fuzzy alpaca yarn, which is, to be honest, kind of a nightmare. Been there, done that. All right, but without further ado, let's just dive straight into the tips. Tip number 1, how to make knitting in the round smoother. I don't know if you've ever encountered this, but I am at the moment working on this kind of fuzzy knit. I'm using Drops Melody, and it is kind of a struggle to knit because it's very sticky. It doesn't really want to glide or slide on my knitting needles, which makes the whole knitting experience, well, not so great. So my tip for this is you can actually use an interchangeable needle, like circular needles. And here on this tip, I've put the 6mm needle, which is the one I'm currently knitting with, my project. But here on the left-hand side, I've put a smaller size needle. So this is a 4.5, so US 7. So 1.5 sizes smaller size on my left-hand side. So I'm gonna actually start now using this. So I'm gonna change the needle. When you think about it, when you're knitting, it's actually only this, the right-hand needle, that is doing the work, and this one is determining how large my stitches are. So you changing the left-hand needle for a smaller one will just make it easier for your stitches to glide, and it's not gonna affect your gauge whatsoever. Tip number 2, how to avoid rowing out. So have you ever knitted something in stockinette stitch and you look at your work and you can kind of see these little ridges or like waves, and you're not actually that thrilled about it. So this is called rowing out. Rowing out basically means that you can kind of see these little ridges. So usually that happens when you've purled on the wrong side, and usually most people tend to purl a little looser. Here on the wrong side, you can really see it quite clearly that like every second or so row just looks a little looser. So here you see the reverse stockinette when I've knitted in the round, and it's quite even. But here where I've worked it flat, you can kind of see this rowing out really happening. So what you can do when you're knitting something flat, so you're going back and forth in stockinette stitch, and if you're using a circular needle like this here that I am using, again, we're gonna do this same trick that we're gonna actually take an interchangeable circular needle. And for one tip, I'm gonna put the size needle that I've determined for my work. So in this case, that's a 4mm, so that's a US 6. And I'm gonna use that for my right side rows. But then for the wrong side rows, I'm gonna switch to a smaller size needles. And that will allow me to purl my wrong side rows with a smaller size needle, and thus preventing the rowing out, because that will make me knit my pearls a little tighter, and that should really help. I usually like to go down for my wrong side rows like a half size, sometimes even a full size might do the trick, but you can first try with just a half size, smaller size needle for the wrong side row, and if you still feel like you're rowing out, you can go down a full needle size. I have one more tip that might help you with rowing out, and that actually is about how you hold your yarn. So instead of just going under and over the index finger like this, that I think most knitters will hold the yarn when you're knitting at least continental style. But something that I've found helpful is actually that I will also wrap it around my pinky finger. So I will take my yarn first and wrap it around my pinky finger, like so. Wrap it around once, and then I will take my full hands, the rest of the hands underneath. So let me show you once again. So I wrap it around my pinky finger once, and then the rest of the 3 fingers I take under the yarn. And this will just create more tension. So when I purl, the yarn can't glide as smoothly, and I can tighten it more because I have just like kind of more leverage here. So that's also something definitely worth trying out if rowing out is something that you're struggling with. One question that a lot of you asked for was how to knit neater rib stitch. So the rib stitch is something that we use so much in knitting for all of the cuffs and hems usually, and for collars, and sometimes it can be kind of hard to get it neat looking, like it can end up looking a little wonky. This is my comfort zone sweater, and in this one you can definitely see that some of the stitches, they just look not like super straight and nice and aligned, but a little wonky. And I'm gonna share my tips. So first of all, I always recommend to go down, like go really down in needle size. In most of my knit patterns, I recommend to do your ribs with 2 sizes smaller needles than like the needles you would use for the project otherwise. Obviously, this isn't always the case, depends a little bit. Like here, I think it was only 1 needle size smaller because the like initial needle size was already quite small. This is the sour candy top, and this is actually a twisted rib, which brings me to tip number 2. So going down to a smaller needle size is tip number 1, but tip number 2 is doing a twisted rib stitch. So a twisted rib stitch just means that you will knit the knit stitches through the back loop. So knit 1 TBL is usually how this is abbreviated, and then you just keep the purl stitches as is, and this will create a really refined look. And I have some more examples here in different yarns. You can just see that it will create a super polished look usually, and of course this is maybe the most easy to do when you're knitting the round. So if you would do it then on the wrong side, you would do knit 1 and purl 1 through the back loop. So a little bit more tedious, but totally doable as well. Now, I have also seen online people recommending that when you just do not twisted rib, but like regular rib, that you do the knit stitches just regularly, and then you purl the purl stitches through the back loop. To be honest, I have not really tried this. I don't know if this works. Maybe for some people. I just find that it's like, just feels like a lot of work, to be honest. And I find that switching to a smaller needle size works. Or also that when you do the rib stitch, you hold your yarn with that pinky thing that I showed in the previous tip. So you wrap the yarn around your pinky first and then over your 3 remaining fingers. And that will just make the yarn tension a little bit more, so you will just knit a little neater, I guess is the science behind that one. But those are my tips. If you have more tips, please leave them in the comment below and share your knowledge with us, because I think knitting rib is something that you will just knit so much in your life as a knitter. So we can use all the tips we can get. Okay, moving right along. The next tip is one that was requested by so many of you guys. So it's the famous how to avoid having holes under the arms. So this is something that usually happens when you have put your stitches for the sleeves on hold. Well, yeah. On hold, and then you pick them up again and started knitting the sleeves, and you can sometimes get just in that gap between the underarm stitches and the sleeve stitches this nasty hole, which is not something that you want. Like, yes, for all the air ventilation, I guess, but aesthetically maybe not what we want. So I have a really good tip for avoiding this that I'm going to show you in just a second. But before that, if you have a project that you worked on before and you would like to fix this, so one way is, of course, you can just use some yarn and a tapestry needle, and you can actually go afterwards in and fix this. So you would do this on the wrong side row or on the wrong side of the work, and just kind of sew in, so by hand sewing that gap, and try to find yarn, or if you have the same yarn in your stash, the same color, to kind of just fix that. But another tip when you're actually knitting your sweater is very simple, and it will change your life forever. So let's go over and look at that. So here I'm working on this raglan style sweater, and now I've first just transferred my sleeve stitches onto my needle, and I'm gonna start working the sleeve. And first I'm gonna join in new yarn here in the middle. Usually most patterns will have you pick up stitches here from the middle of the underarm. All right, and then this is now the critical place. You come to this space, which there's kind of a gap. So here's my sleeve stitches. Here are the stitches that I picked up from the underarm. And as you can see here, now there's like this big gap. Now what you can do is you can pick up stitches, some additional stitches here from the gap. So if your pattern said, for example, pick up 5 stitches from the underarm, you would do that. But then before you start knitting the sleeve stitches, you will actually go in and here, so I like to go in and take an extra stitch. So I pick up an extra stitch maybe there, and try to go in, like just kind of look at what will be a good place and try to see that you don't. So now if I go in here, I think that will kind of create a hole in itself. So maybe I will go then one kind of column, one stitch more inwards, and pick up 1 stitch here. So now you have the underarm stitches here that the pattern told us, or the supposed pattern, 5 stitches. And then we have these 2 extra stitches. And this is just gonna mean that we won't have that hole forming because we picked up stitches here as well. Then you would go on and just knit your sleeve stitches just as normally. All right, now I've knitted all of the sleeve stitches, and I'm gonna do the same here. So now again, before I move on to picking up stitches here from those underarm stitches that you most likely cast on while joining for the body or working the lower body, we're gonna go in here and I'm gonna pick up again 2 extra stitches. And I'm gonna look at, so I don't go in like immediately here where there's only like 1 strand. So that will, if I will go in here now, you're gonna see that then that will just create a hole anyways. So I'm not gonna do that, but I'm gonna go in like 1 more, a little bit further in here, pick up a stitch like that, and then I go in, let's say there, pick up 1 more stitch. So those are again my 2 extra stitches. So here you have now your 2 extra stitches before picking up stitches from the underarm, and then I will pick up the same amount of underarm stitches that I did from that first in the beginning of this round essentially. So 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now what we're gonna do on the next round, or next couple of rounds I should say, we're gonna be decreasing these stitches. I'm gonna place here now my beginning of round marker. And what I wanna do now is I'm gonna decrease those extra stitches. So first I'm gonna knit 5, because that's what the pattern told me to pick up. But then we have these 2 or 4 extra stitches now that we kind of need to get rid of. Get rid of the body, get rid of the extra stitches. So here in the first round, I'm just gonna simply knit up to those extra stitches, and I know that it's 5 stitches from my beginning, and I'm gonna knit these 2 together. And then we only have 1 more stitch. So then I can just go ahead and work my sleeve up until, again, I have those underarm stitches and those extra stitches. You could even, if you get confused, you can put like stitch markers to mark where you have those extra stitches that we picked up from the gap. And I'm actually not gonna do, so you could do an SSK here, but I actually find that the most invisible decrease is to do a knit two together. So I'm just gonna do a knit two together here as well, and then gonna knit and complete that round. Oh, and I'm gonna knit that actually stitch twisted because it was for some reason a little loose. So you can do that. And then you're actually gonna knit one round of just plain knitting and then do that once more. So then you would knit 5 here in the beginning and knit 2 together, or you would knit 4 and knit 2 together, a little bit depending on your pattern, to be honest, but just to get that one extra stitch now that we have on both sides, get rid of that one as well. And now, of course, this was only for stockinette stitch, so if you have a project with like lace or some cables, that makes it trickier, but I think you can still use this same technique and tip, and I have done that many times. You just need to be mindful about where you then have those underarm stitches and then like your pattern stitches, but essentially you can treat those stitches that you pick up from the gap. You can have like a little section of those stockinette stitch. In most patterns, I don't think you will really be able to see that, so then you can just then get rid of them by doing these few rounds where you just knit them together, and in the final piece you're not really gonna see it.
New shoes, new move. I don't want the fake love on dailies.
All right, moving on to the next tip, which is a really good one. It's how to pick up the right amount of stitches. This is something that, as a knitter, you will know can be really tricky to find that sweet spot when you have to pick up stitches for example, a button band, a collar, or even a sleeve. Because if you pick up too many stitches, what will happen is that it gets very kind of flaring out. So this is a button band where I think there's been a bit too many stitches picked up, so it kind of flares out. But then if you pick up too few stitches, what can happen is it really strains the fabric. So it will just become kind of stretched out where you don't maybe really want it to be stretched out. So finding that sweet spot is of course something that comes with just doing it a lot, like you get a kind of intuition for it. But, and here's the great thing that I've prepared for you, a little bit of a cheat sheet. So I'm gonna share some of the ratios that usually work for most projects. Again, this is not like the definite, well, you know what I mean, list. But this is a good cheat sheet. So I'm gonna share the ratios that usually work pretty well, or the ones that I default to, and then you can screenshot this or take your phone and take a photo of it if you're watching this on a TV. So you can refer to this back if the pattern, for example, doesn't say how many stitches you should pick up, like the pickup rhythm. So let's go through this one by one, and then I will share the little cheat sheet at the end. So for sleeves, when you don't have sleeves that you've had on hold, but you have to pick up stitches for the sleeves, my ratio, my go-to ratio is 2 stitches per 3 rows. So that means that you will pick up a stitch, and then you will skip one. So you'll always pick up 2 stitches per 3 rows along the entire sleeve opening. Again, this is just like kind of a little bit of a guide. It doesn't always necessarily work out, but usually that's a pretty good ratio. Next up, button bands. Here is the Limoncello's cardigan. And here, when you're not doing a double knitted button band, so a double knitted button band, you will usually pick up 1 stitch per row when you're working then in double knitting. This is the Daydreamer cardigan. But here, where you have a rib button band, usually 5 stitches per 7 rows is the ratio that I default to and will usually work pretty well. So that means that you pick up one, you skip one, then you pick up one, pick up one, and skip one. So you get 5 per 7 stitches.
When you're picking up stitches for colors, my recommended ratio is to pick up 1 stitch per 1 stitch for example, cast on edges or bind off edges. So there I usually go in 1 stitch per 1 stitch. And then if you have a curved edge, like here, for example, you can see there's been some increases. And also here we have these rows. There I usually like to pick up 2 stitches per 3 rows. So that means that you pick up one, and then you skip one. And in general, that works pretty well, especially if the pattern doesn't specify how many stitches or the pickup rhythm. Then 1 stitch per 1 stitch for any type of cast on or bind off edge where you basically have stitches that you're picking up from. And then for any type of curved edges where you have rows, 2 stitches per 3 rows.
And lastly, for an I-cord, so this is an I-cord bind off that's done here at the neckline. Usually what works is to pick up 1 stitch per 1 stitch or 1 stitch per 1 row. All right, and here is the cheat sheet, the graphic. So you can take a screenshot of this with your phone so you can keep it handy, or you can take your phone if you're watching this on TV and just take a photo of this. So you will always have it, so you can always refer to this when you have to pick up stitches and you're not really sure how to get the best ratio. Next up is a tip if you have circular needles that just want to curl in on themselves all the time. This can be super frustrating when you want to knit and they just keep doing this. So I have a very quick tip for this that it was actually Ida who found on TikTok a while back. So you can just take this cable and dip it into some hot water, not totally boiling, but just hot is enough. And then you dip it in the water and then you straighten a little bit and it will be straight again. Voila! Next up is a tip for weaving in the ends. So my tip is definitely to use a very sharp tapestry needle. I think that helps so much when you're gonna weave in the ends. So you thread your end or tail on a sharp tapestry needle, and what I like to go is then of course you're gonna weave in it on the wrong side and try to make it as invisible as possible. And then usually what I try to do is I try to go in a few directions. So let me show you what I mean by that.
The good thing when you're using a sharp tapestry needle is that you can go in and sort of break the yarn. So you can actually go through the yarn. Can you see? Here I'm breaking it, and that will actually create more friction, so it will just help it stay in place better. And what I will usually do is to go in a few directions. So actually here now you can see it's kind of visible, which isn't great if this would be like a cuff or something. Now here, this is my armhole, so it doesn't matter a lot. But if I wanted it to be really invisible, I would probably go through this column instead. So, and I usually always try to go in a few directions. So here, I would go in maybe through here. So that's one direction, like horizontal. And then I would probably go like vertical. And I would try to maybe go here. And not like too long distances either. So you can see that's much more invisible. And then I will go again in horizontally. Try to break the yarn a little bit. Like so. And not pull too much. Make sure that you kind of stretch it out so that you don't pull the yarn, the fabric. And then I will go in another direction again, a little bit downwards. But of course, this always comes a little bit to your discretion of where you're weaving in an end. But as you can see, that's much more invisible. And then again, I would go in here and really make sure. So like at least 3 to 4 different directions is usually what I use. And like that. And I think it's pretty invisible. And I have a fair bit of confidence that it's not gonna go unraveling.
All right, are you ready for the next tip? This is the one that is maybe the most useful in the entire video. This could be a video in itself, I have to say. This is a technique you can apply to many things, but we're gonna talk about how to fix a cable that you've twisted the wrong way. This has happened to me multiple times. You're knitting along and suddenly you look down at your work and you're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? What happened? And you see that a cable is twisted the wrong way. You were maybe watching TV, just not looking at your work, and it's like further down. So there is a way to fix this, and I'm gonna show you. And actually, of course, you can fix a cable that's twisted the wrong way with this technique, but actually really any mistake you're able to fix with this technique. It's gonna take a little time. I recommend having some light, but I'm gonna show you what I mean and how to do this.
All right, so we're gonna pretend that I have a cable that I've crossed the wrong way, and we're gonna fix that. For this, I recommend that you have some double pointed needles. It's just going to make it so much easier. You can also use this technique without double pointed needles. It's a little bit more finicky, but it's totally doable. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to use them because it's just a little bit more clear to see what's going on. So let's say that this cable is twisted the wrong way and we now want to go back and fix that. So the first thing you want to do is you're going to just locate the stitches in question. So I have here, this is the croissant sweater that I'm working on, and this cable is 6 stitches. So those 6 stitches I've located here, and I'm gonna go ahead and just drop them off my needle. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So those are the stitches, and this is the place we want to fix. So here you could put some needle stoppers or some rubber bands if you want, just to make sure that you don't drop any other stitches. All right, and the next step is simple. So now we're gonna go and basically frog only this part up until the place that we want to correct. So I'm just gonna do that by kind of pulling the yarn here. So that is 1 row, frogged, or ripped back a second one. And I'm gonna continue sort of doing this. I'm just kind of pulling that thread so you can see that these stitches aren't unraveling because they're still on our needles. So it's only these stitches where our issue is. So if you had a different type of cable, you need to, all of those stitches, you need to basically rip back. All right, and now we need to pay attention a little bit. So we want to rip back to just that place where the mistake happened. So now it looks that this is where the twist happened. So we need to rip back that row still. All right, and now you can see, so that would be the place where the mistake happened. So now we're gonna go and pick up these stitches. So I'm gonna use the double pointed needle. You could also use your right hand needle. All right, so now we have picked up those stitches and then we have all of this yarn here. And now basically what we're gonna do, so now we can sort of re-knit just this part of our fabric. So now because we have a cable that I wanted to twist the other way, I'm gonna use a second double pointed needle and I'm gonna transfer half of the stitches onto that one. And then now, if I would have had the cable twisted the wrong way, I can now go and correct that. So now I can basically knit them the other way. So let's do that. So for this cable, actually didn't have a mistake, but let's say we did have. So now I want to have these stitches in front. These need to be back. So I need to knit these first. All right, so now we basically set ourselves up so we can go ahead and re-knit this cable, only this section. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna locate these strands. So here are all the strands that we used to knit those rows. And we're gonna basically use this yarn for each row to re-knit this cable. So let me show you how to go about it. So you're gonna go ahead and have a look and gonna see which one is the most bottom kind of loop here. So this is the last row that I frogged. So then I'm just gonna like use this loop basically and gonna re-knit my cable. So I go in here with my third now double pointed needle, and then I'm gonna, if I would sort of knit them regularly, tighten there at the beginning and use this loop to re-knit my cable, now cross the correct way. All right, those were my back needles. And now I want to knit these that I had here in front. So I go ahead and set myself up to do that. Don't need that third double pointed needle anymore. So you can see now I've sort of crossed them the other way. And then I continue, I use this strand again of yarn and I can knit these stitches. And sometimes what happens when you pick up stitches, they might be twisted the wrong way, so just be mindful. So I think some of these I need to actually knit through the back loop just because they were twisted the wrong way on my needle, as you can see here. So that means that the left leg here is in front instead of the right leg that's usually in front when we knit. All right. And there you go. So there you have the first row re-knit. And now you can see there's still some yarn here left. So you might have to pull the yarn a little bit just to distribute it more evenly. All right, after you have fixed that initial error, things get a little more easier. So we can again grab our other double pointed needle, and you're always gonna locate that yarn strand that is at the lowest. So basically the last row or this next row, depending on your logic. And now we're just always gonna use one of those loops to knit these stitches that are on our double pointed needle. All right, so there we have one more row knitted. Again, there's like a little bit of yarn here left, so I'm just gonna go and pull it and try to distribute the yarn so the tension gets a little bit more even. And don't worry, you can also do this afterwards. All right, and then I'm just gonna push again my double pointed needle all the way to the left side, so I can go ahead and just take that next row of yarn. That would be this one, this loop. And then again, I just repeat and knit all these stitches with that loop of yarn. All right, now I have reknitted the cable, and now you can see that there's a little bit of like loose stitches here on this side, which doesn't look so great. So I'm gonna go in and pull a little bit on these stitches to try to get that looseness basically away, get rid of it. We don't want it. All right, so that is it. Then you can go ahead and just transfer your stitches back to your working needle and continue right along. And of course, you can use this technique on many different things. So if there's like a cable you twisted, of course, yeah, but if you have some lace stitches or you forgot to add something, a decrease, an increase, basically it's all really workable with this technique.
Next tip is the best invisible decrease. Now, one thing that can happen when you're knitting is suddenly you have an extra stitch. For some reason, we don't know what happened, but we've all been there. You count your stitches and it's like, where did the stitch come from? Or stitches. And of course, this always will kind of reveal your true colors as a knitter and personality-wise. Are you okay living with that unknownness of not knowing where it came from? So will you rip it back? Or what I recommend, especially if you're doing just like a stockinette stitch project, you can just decrease that stitch away. Now, of course, the best invisible decrease is to do a knit two together, and the placement matters. So if you would suddenly have too many stitches, like honestly, like 1 or 2 stitches in a stockinette stitch project, like it's not gonna be a deal breaker because it's only gonna be like a half centimeter or centimeter at most. But of course, if then there's like a rib or there's something that's gonna happen, you need to have the correct amount of stitches, and even more so if there's lace or some kind of cable, like any of these things. But I will definitely, like, I'm a knitter who obviously I want it to be as perfect as I can get it, but I will not like rip back hours or days of work just because there's an extra stitch in there. So then you can just do a knit two together, an invisible decrease, and nobody will ever know. Okay friends, it has come time for the last tip of this video. And it's gonna be all about stripes. And I, for one, am pretty obsessed about stripes at the moment. But one thing that comes up when you're gonna knit stripes in the round is you will get a bit of a jog. So where the join, so basically when you're switching rounds, you can get this here. Well, here you can't see probably because I've done, no. Well, you can't see because that's not the place where I've switched yarns. But how to get basically a jogless stripe so you don't get this offset of the stripe when you switch rounds is what I'm trying to say. So there is a tip for this. So this is my Sailor Swift top, and here is the stripe pipe dress, and here we had so many changes of colors. So there is a little tip that I'm going to show you how to avoid that. So let me show you how to do that.
I want to show you how to create a seamless jog here between the stripes. So first, when you change to your other color or the second color, just knit the first round as you would normally do. But then when you come here to the end and you're about to start your second round with that new color or the different color, I want to show you what you can do. So there I have my beginning of a marker. Here, so this is now the second round that I'm about to start. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up here a loop of the old color. So basically I go into the row below and I just pick up the stitch or a loop of that old color, and then I'm going to knit these two together. All right, I have now worked my neck part of the balaclava, and here you can see the place where I've switched or changed color. And with this little trick, and especially after blocking this, it's gonna be barely noticeable.
All right, you have made it to the end. This was all my knitting tips, the updated version 2026. And as I said in the beginning, there's gonna be a video diving into short rows because that deserves a video of its own. And of course, if you'd like to see, or if you haven't seen the previous ones with the knitting tips the videos that I have on my channel already, I'm gonna link to those below. And you can also use the cards here up in the corner, so check out those as well. And also, I always forget to mention, I actually have another YouTube channel, and it's called Stitch School by Kika. And on that YouTube channel, you will find basically knitting techniques and tips in bite-sized formats, so much kind of smaller or shorter videos, I should say. So if there's a specific technique that you're looking for, I can highly recommend to check out Stitch School by Kika, which I show, where I show all of these techniques that come up in my patterns and most knitting patterns a lot. So go and check that out. And as always, if you'd like to come and say hi and see more of what I'm working on, you can come and see me at Kutova Kika on Instagram. Also, if you like this video and would like to see more of these type of videos, make sure to subscribe and like this video. That helps support our knitting work here. And I hope you enjoyed this, hope you found some value, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, bye!